You're listening to the Slavic Literature Pod, your shelf help guide to all things Slavic.
I'm Cameron Lalana.
And I'm Matt Gerasimovich.
And today we are covering Chapter 1, Part 5 of Vasily Grossman's Life and Fate. I got it right the first time for once.
Part 1, Chapter 5.
What did I say? Part 5, Chapter 1?
Yeah.
Damn it. All right, well, I flew a little too close to the sun. I almost got it right for once. And now we see my hubris. Anyway, so this part we're still continuing to cover the camp, in this case moving from, prisoner life, a longer piece into talking about the internationalism of the people here, even though many people do not speak the same language, from the US, from England, from Russia, from many other places. They still find ways to communicate. And then interestingly, if you've read it, there's a lacuna, there's an omission there, which, as Chandler notes, is from the original text that they're translating from. And then we have two last paragraphs which focus in on the Red Army soldiers specifically and their inability to come to common understanding or common conclusions. And that's kind of, for me at least, what makes this chapter so interesting, because there's clearly an argument that was meant to be developed here, or maybe was and was removed, and now we're kind of left in the lurch with really truly getting at what Grossman is understanding here. And I don't know, where do you want to start with this, Matt?
Well, I like the omission here. And one of our Discord users rightfully pointed this out. Gabe was, talking a little bit about it. But he also said that today's chapter feels like strict historical record, especially with kind of how it ends, because you get this, again, this pulling back from the narrator as the narrator is overlooking the 20th century, as you could see much of the tragedy of the 20th century of how we don't really kind of understand each other. And I think that this is actually a really good point, and this is probably not how it was intended to be constructed, but how I interpret it, in the sense that just both within the 20th century and within this chapter as a whole, we don't really get the sense of completeness because of the fact that we know something was omitted, and it wasn't just omitted and glossed over. It was, printed as, these dots with the footnote that there was a passage missing, and we don't ever get to know what that would have been or could have been or should have been. And so this kind of it's almost like an absence that is present with you as you read. And to me, that is what this sort of era of the 20th century, that's what it feels like. And that is, in a way, also kind of the tragedy of the 20th century, if I may stray on the pretentious side for a moment.
Please do.
Yeah. Well, only Alfie, my dog, is here with me right now, so I will. He doesn't mind when I go on pretentious tangents.
I would imagine he even encourages it. I think he just likes your company.
Yeah. He's very studious, actually. But so, anyways, this was great that people are noticing this, and not only noticing that it's a thing in the book, but also that it does play a role in how we perceive the thing that we're reading.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And it almost, kind of like you say, it almost becomes art. The omission itself becomes art in its own way, as you say, that it creates a whole new meaning, which is clearly not intended. But, not only that, but also in the ways that we have this kind of almost black box between this internationalism and then suddenly, washing machine noise, and then all these people, all these common bonds, a common language, common understanding, who cannot, who can't come to any common understanding. And, yeah, and what is Grossman arguing? I can't say for sure, but we certainly can read a lot into it. I'm sure when you read that line, if you're reading along with us, you certainly had a reaction. You had a gut reaction, and maybe went with it. Maybe you started second guessing yourself. But certainly, I would bet that you had a gut reaction. Something was evoked for you when you read that line, I would imagine.
Well, I'd hope so. It was a great line, but also I think in this chapter we kind of get the more of the linguistic side of some of the camps and just what it would have been like to be alive at this time, just kind of compressed together with so many different people from different countries speaking so many different languages. And it's just interesting, the words that Grossman notes that they understand in each other's languages. And you have the very low, common, everyday bread, cigarettes, things like that. And then you also have the sort of the camp lingo, the sort of uh, horror of it deriving from the fact that these are on an equal level to cigarettes and bread. Things like roll call, extermination camp, flight point, camp guards. The fact that these are just as necessary to know as bread and cigarettes is, of course, where the sort of horror of it derives from. But it's interesting nonetheless to sort of see him bring these kind of together because I think with it being translated in English and whatnot, you don't sort of. It's just kind of hard to, I guess, get the sense of it when you don't see the different languages always together when they're, translated for the most part here.
Yeah, definitely. And also going along with that note of talking about this kind of horror of the ways that they've learned to communicate, there's also, as a reader noted, or as a listener, I should say, Tom Bombadillo on Discord noted, there's also the sort of a beauty in being able to do that. Tom writes, I really loved Grossman's depiction of communication without language, i.e. the old sergeant had a fine command of every language except foreign ones. I've always found something beautiful in not necessarily understanding words, and not necessarily understanding exactly what someone is saying, but the emotions behind those words, which, yeah, definitely a motivating force throughout this chapter, in terms of these people understanding each other. And, like I think it's an English pilot, sorry, I don't have the text in front of me, who, gets really interested in the Red Army and the Red Army chaps. So very, up until that omission, not a feel-good chapter. Nothing in the camp is a feel-good chapter, but certainly like kind of I guess, an emotional high point in seeing the ways that they maintain still these bonds.
Yeah, I don't think we get anything that's even remotely feel-good for another like 2 weeks until we go back to the kind of domestic side.
Sure. And that's only setting you up for us all up for a deeper fall. So
yeah, yeah, it is. You think, oh great, we finally get a breath of fresh air, and then Grossman just slaps you with a cold fish, and he says, "No, no breath, no breath of air, no air for you." Back to the reading.
You think people in the war got a breath of fresh air? No. That's what I'm trying to evoke for you.
And boy, does he.
Right. Okay, well, I think that's, unless there's anything else you wanted to cover, everything we had for today. So in that case, we will see you all again tomorrow.